Okay, welcome everyone to an emergency meeting, not emergency meeting, a one-item meeting of the Kingston upon Thames Schools Forum. Today, for the recording, is Monday the 15th of December. We are focusing on one key item, but we'll get to that in a minute. Introductions and apologies. There aren't any at this point. We've been here. Kevin, any apologies?
Neil Smith sent apologies. He has a substitute, Rebecca Harris. Esther White might arrive late. She has another commitment, and Gareth Dutton, Councillor Farshid Sadr Hashemi.
Okay, thank you. And other than Rebecca Harris, are there any other colleagues stepping in to support and do that voting? Because obviously the voting's going to be important on those items. Do we know if anyone else has come for that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Just making sure we covered it. Any declarations of interest from anyone new, not previously in here? Sam, you have a declaration of interest. Surprise.
I do indeed, Ash. Thank you. Yes, so obviously I won't be voting and I won't be joining in the discussion unless Ash directs me to answer something. All the answers to the questions that were raised were in the document that's been distributed. So I am basically just here as an observer. Thank you.
And can I just take this publicly as an opportunity to thank Sam for the considerable work she has done responding to the question, the queries, while also, you know, the day job of running a cracking organisation as well. So thank you, Sam, for that. And indeed, thank you to AFC officers for their responses and councillors for their responses, alongside those of you that contributed to those previous questions. That then moves us on to minutes of the last meeting. Are there any queries pertaining to anything that isn't the Malden Oaks AP agenda item that anyone wanted to raise? Okay, thank you. Also, at that meeting, we agreed that we would then move forward to agreeing a funding model for the secondary alternative provision at Malden Oaks. We're being looked to see if the recommendation is that Schools Forum is asked to discuss the options for the secondary alternative provision and places at Malden Oaks, and then vote for which funding model we'd support moving forward. I'm going to hand over to Scott in a moment to present the paper. And I think it's really important that it's Scott presenting the paper. I've been asked questions and asked these things in terms of a representation of an AFC officer. I am not. So it's really important that that goes with those guys. When we then get to it, we have three options that we're going to be voting for. Scott's going to talk through. We have had some late votes, as in within the last 45 minutes. Scott will not be able to include them into the diagram itself. However, it is still important for Forum to hear where those votes would go, what they were, because this is such an important situation. So unless it's come in during this meeting, Scott will still report to saying secondary or primary school and where it's gone. Just a bit of a sort of, I often with my trustees and governors do a bit of previously on, because they often forget what we had agreed previously and what we did. So in the last meeting, we agreed that we didn't have substantive information at that point to make an informed and appropriate decision. At that point, then we agreed that as heads and as those members of Schools Forum, we would agree to put together a packet of questions that could then be sort of frequency analysed to come to ones that would help us make this decision. They were around how budgeting decisions were made, the role of the council, the role of officers. In the last week or so, those were asked, and in the last week, those have been answered in full. And again, thank you to colleagues for doing those. We are now at this meeting, we have to make a decision. We have to vote today. We cannot, because of the APT, take it any further. And so a decision needs to be made on whether we go with those three options. In terms of voting, as always, voting will be done by members of the Schools Forum. If you are not a member of the Schools Forum and included as part of the member of the Forum, you do not have a voting right. Sorry to be mean, but That's really important that we do that so that everything is fair, transparent, because of course this is the lives of kids and the lives of people we really care for and respect. So I hope that sums it up. Once Scott's finished his presentation, if there are any questions, please do ask. But on this occasion, I'm going to hand over to you now, Scott.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ash. Just a really quick rundown of what we've been asked to vote on today. So here's the report. So essentially, Schools Forum are asked to discuss the options for secondary alternative provision, places at Morden Oaks, and vote for which funding model they would support moving forwards. So there was 3 options within this paper, as Ash again has alluded to. Option 1 was retain all 45 places, and that involved a schools block to Heine's block transfer of 571,700. That also involved a disapplication that needed to go to the Secretary of State because it took us over the 0.5% schools block transfer amount. Option 2 was reduce the numbers from 45 to 35 places at Morden Oaks. That would involve 24 places covered by the high needs block and 11 covered by the schools to high needs block transfer, which would be 292,800. That does not involve a Secretary of State approval or a disapplication. Or option 3, which was to reduce the numbers down from 45 to 24 places, all of which were funded from the high needs block, and no schools block to high needs block transfer would be relevant in this situation. So if we go on to the results, and again, Ash has already alluded to this, what was on the screen isn't necessarily the full results, because we've had 3 secondary schools that have submitted responses after the deadline, or certainly after the report was published. So originally we had 30 responses out of the 45 schools consulted, which was 67%. This is now changed to 33 out of the 45, which is 73%. 34 primary schools were consulted and 24 responded, which is 71%. 11 secondary schools were consulted and now 9 responded, which is 81%. 18 of the 24 maintained schools, which were all primary, responded, which was 75%, and 12, which is now 15 of the 21 academy schools responded. 6 out of the 10 primary and 9 now out of the possible 11, which again is 81%. So ignore the graphs because these are now incorrect. Option 1, we had 7 schools respond for option 1, not the 6 that's on the screen. That's 7. That was 2 secondary schools and 5 primary schools. Option 1, remember, is retain 45 places. Option 2, we had 10 respond for option 2. That was 6 secondary schools and 4 primary schools. And for option 3, we had 16 responses, as it says on the screen, 1 secondary and 15 primary schools. So the total percentages are for option 1, 21%, option 2, 30%, and option 3, 48%. So slightly different from the graph on the screen. That's all I wanted to present actually today. What I'll do is, while you're discussing, I'll change those option 1 and option 2 and option 3 so we can see it more visually on the screen. I won't be able to change the graph, but I'll be able to change what the option 1, option 2, option 3 says while you're making that discussion.
Scott, would you just go through the percentages again, mostly because I'm useless and didn't put them down,
Yes.
For option 1, 2, and 3?
Option 1, 21%, 7 of 33. Option 2, 30%, that's 10 of the 33. Option 3, 48%.
Okay, so just to confirm, option 1, 21, option 2, 30, and option 3, 48. Thank you, Scott. If you wouldn't mind stopping sharing that screen, that'd be helpful.
Yep.
Okay, everyone, so shortly, or indeed in a long time, we'll be bringing this to a vote on option 1, 2, or 3. Before that, it's important to gain discussion, gain any questions, have any thoughts from any of this. So I will offer questions or discussion to the floor before we move to any vote. And again, those questions can be around anything, and indeed bundling things together, or as you see fit. Sophie, thank you for that first question, and then I'll come to you, Sean, afterwards.
I've got 3 questions. One, I'd really like to hear from Sam now having seen how schools have voted, just to give a sense from your perspective, if it was option 3, what does that mean for you, or what do you think that that means for provision in Kingston? Because I think it's really important. Second thing is that this is voting for 26-27, and I think it's a really invidious position to put the team at Malden Oaks in, and indeed actually all heads in Kingston, particularly secondaries, to sort of, you know, year on year tiptoe through this and not have certainty about provision in the longer term. And I think one of the things that certainly from discussions I've had with other MAT leaders and heads is that we need to do work earlier in really understanding the high needs block, and all heads understanding both secondary, primary, whether maintained or academy, and understanding, you know, the decisions that we are all making about the spend on high needs block, to really understand, you know, how we can sustain and have some sustainability around AP, which is absolutely vital to us in Kingston. You know, I think all heads would agree with that, and I know AFC colleagues would agree with that. But I do feel that, you know, sort of limping from year to year and not having certainty is not a way forward. And ultimately, there is, as Esther would say, the cake is the cake. And, you know, we have to get better at understanding the decisions as heads, I think, as well as other members of the Schools Forum, in the decisions that we're making as to how we apportion the money that is available in the high needs block, because clearly there isn't an appetite for heads to surrender more of their budgets in a time when they're really, really struggling. And it's perhaps unsurprising, I think, that, you know, you see that distortion of primary school saying, actually, no, thank you, when they're in a really difficult place. And it's not that they're not supporting their secondary colleagues, because it's their children that are moving to our schools. You know, we all have that moral imperative. But clearly primary school head teachers don't feel that they have the wherewithal to be able to support this, and that's really worrying. So that second piece is, I think we've got to start earlier, really unpicking the high needs block as a group to really, you know, inform the decisions that we're making. And lastly, you know, I'd be really interested to hear AFC's view on this, because I appreciate they don't have a voting right, but with those 3 options laid out and the prospect of being option 3, if Forum were to vote in line with what the heads have said, what does that mean to you guys? So Sam, then Sheldon, perhaps.
Thank you, Sophie. So if we go question by question in that, the first question then, Sam, is to you in terms of, and Sophie, I don't mean to paraphrase, but in terms of what does it mean to you if we go to that option 3 model that is where the majority is at the moment.
Thanks, Ash. Is it okay if I speak a little bit more broadly? Just don't want to go outside of my remit. But just to pick up Sophie's point about how it's not really sustainable for any school, including Malden Oaks, to operate on a budget that has to be voted on each year. That is something that I think I spoke about at the last Schools Forum, and it is a concern to me, which is why actually I don't think option 1, where an even larger amount of our budget would be voted on, and therefore could potentially next year that could be all taken away. To me, that's not a sustainable way to run a school budget. So that was just to kind of pick up on that point, Sophie. And I suppose in terms of what does it mean for if the vote was to go for option 3, I mean, obviously there would be an immediate impact on those children that are already with us, because that would take effect from April. Obviously we have I think we have 35 students with us at this moment in time. So obviously other arrangements would have to be made. They would have to presumably return to their mainstream schools, the ones that aren't permanently excluded or through the Fair Access Panel from April, which obviously wouldn't be a very desirable situation. The other thing, I suppose, is that we we have been looking at a lot of ways of generating income, again, as all schools will do when faced with this kind of situation. And we have been possibly even more successful than we anticipated in terms of generating income from other boroughs. However, personally, I feel like we are a Kingston provision, and we want as much of our work to be targeted at Kingston children and supporting Kingston schools. So while there might still be ways of generating more income, that's not really our preference, because we believe that we are part of the Kingston family of schools, and we want to carry on making Kingston children our priority. Have I answered everything, Sophie? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks very much, Sam. And I think we trust each other enough to go, if you want to go broad, go broad. Then the second question there, I think, is more one for sort of officers there, in terms of, I think important to clarify that if Sam's saying she doesn't want option one particularly, or well, not doesn't want, but that would have a burden on there. What would be Sophie was saying around how do we achieve that certainty for Malden Oaks? How do we get that earlier knowledge on the high needs budget to inform decisions, to ensure, to use that phrase, that we're not limping from year to year? So I don't know, Lucy or Scott, if that's something for you. And Sophie, if I've misrepresented that, please do jump in.
Scott, do you want me to answer that one?
Yeah, go for it. I'll chip in Lucy on what I feel as well.
I mean, I think what's tricky with obviously the way we have to set the local funding formula is that we do have to agree on an annual basis how obviously schools funding is spent. That being said, what Schools Forum could do is almost, agree a 2-year or a 3-year intention, and then just ratify that intention each year if you want to give more certainty to Malden Oaks. As I say, it does need to be an annual decision, but it's not unheard of that Schools Forum, in the same way as we've done with targeted high needs, have set a kind of for targeted high needs, it was a 3-year intention. So everyone affected could kind of plan around, reductions in funding or increases in funding, whatever it is. So that would be my recommendation to Forum, in terms of, if you want to provide some certainty, set an intention, and then, everyone kind of knows where they are, but it would need to be an annual decision. I mean, I think one of the things that is an uncertainty for everyone at the moment is what will play out in terms of the national funding formula, what local decision-making power will remain after the national funding formula comes in. And I can't answer those questions at the moment because the DfE haven't, provided that information. As I say, in terms of Forum, you can set an intention for multi-years, if you do want to provide some certainty.
But that intention, I would assume, is not compelling. We could change that intention every year. So I would assume, therefore, it doesn't add any more certainty to Sam and the team making that, because, of course, as the national picture moves, people may well change their intentions on that. So it's not a constitutionally compelling, or no, so it would be a sort of, I really want to, right, okay.
Exactly, in exactly the same way as the Targeted High Needs Fund, there was an intention for a kind of a 3-year programme to reduce that down. It would work in exactly the same way, but at any point Schools Forum could change their mind, because it does have to be an annual decision.
Okay. And then that takes us to the third one. I don't know, Ian or anyone else from AFC, in terms of, from a student point of view, Sophie, I think you were saying, in terms, or what does it mean to AFC to have obviously we're thinking the broad AFC, this has already happened, hasn't it, in Richmond in part, and we're not yet seen that, but we know, Sam, that you are, like you said, you are having to and have had to move children that were in the Richmond provision now either back to school or back to alternate provision. I suppose it's, what does it mean to AFC is Sophie's question, and I'd add, what do we do in the situation of more PEXs or more, because that's going to be an unintended consequence of all of this for option 3, isn't it? So yeah, I don't know if there's anyone wants to respond, or at least we can go in, but I don't know, so Scott or Lucy, if that's your remit.
It's probably more
Sheldon's here. Sheldon's here.
Sheldon.
I've got Sheldon. Sorry. Go, Sheldon.
Yeah, thanks, Ash.
Sorry.
And for those that don't know me, I'm Sheldon Sasher. I'm the AD for Pupil Support. So I work closely with AP providers and our AP pathways as well, AP being the alternative provision pathways. It's hard to say, isn't it, knowing that the delayed white paper is imminent. So I think it's hard to say, but keeping it quite broad brush like Sam did, I think when the white paper comes out, it may change the landscape somewhat with certainly with funding and things like that, and that drive around mainstream inclusion. But I think implications on the students, I think school colleagues are probably best placed there as well to kind of know within your own settings what that might mean. But I think from a wider AFC perspective, it's around, we've been looking at our flexibility in terms of our curriculum at secondary, because each school has kind of acknowledged there are a number of students who find it hard to access that mainstream curriculum. And we've been taking some steps to develop more flexibility within our offer. So I think we will have to expedite some of that if the option is taken to reduce those numbers to 24. And I know that the more flexible options we've discussed also have funding implications as well, because we're trying to open up the courses that are available to said students, and mainstream schools don't necessarily have that economies of scale to be able to deliver things like functional skills or that the flexibility there. So we would have to consider ramping up the speed of that. We've invested a lot in our hybrid provision across the borough. It's not just AFC, it's kind of wider. So there's been a lot of success with things like Step by Step, Malden Oaks Discover, Anstey Bridge, and they've got their place. So naturally, there would be an increased pressure on those provisions as well, which we would have to consider. And whilst they're successful, I'm not sure if they could take kind of additional numbers coming through there. But just thinking about your comment about increase in permanent exclusions, Ash, I guess if we look at the numbers that Sam shared at any one time, how many are directed from FAP, there would be an implication on FAP and mainstream schools taking on more of those. Not all of them that are directed to Malden Oaks are at risk of permanent exclusion. Sometimes they're, as you know, full well, there are language barriers, they're new to country, that have other vulnerabilities. So I don't necessarily think it would be a direct thing to say, right, well, we're reducing by however many that they're all going to be permanent exclusion. I don't necessarily think that will be the case, but I think we'd also have to consider more in-reach work in schools, would be what my first thought is. So there's just some off the cuff, because I only received this paper probably an hour ago, so these are some of the thoughts that I've sort of come up with initially.
Thank you, Sheldon. And yeah, that's the nature of this. Obviously, everything's on the hoof because we decided to extend it and people wanted more information. So I really appreciate that. Sophie, does that close off the kind of responses that you were looking for and things? Just want to make sure that is, and of course, further opportunities, of course. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. No question, just an observation, really. It seems relevant to me that 7 of the 9 secondary schools that replied to the survey have gone for either option 1 or option 2, i.e. increased funding and more places. I think it was that option 2 was the 6 secondaries, which seems to suggest that as the sort of main users of Malden Oaks, I would imagine, in secondary education, we realise the benefit that is for some of our most vulnerable young people, and we are sort of prepared to make the tough decision to give up some of our budgets to ensure we have those places available. I don't mean to denigrate the primary schools in any way whatsoever, but it does seem to me relevant that where the secondary schools are putting their votes.
Thank you, Sean. Absolutely right to point out, and also right to point out that on Schools Forum, it is the representation of all of us as education institutions, irrespective of key stage. But you're absolutely right. It is clear that the main users of the product, not product, Sam, it's way more than a product, are voting that way. Sorry, Esther.
Hi, thanks, Ash. More commentary, really, just to build on Sean's and Sophie's, because this is really quite complex, isn't it? And what we talk about in Forum is all of the moving parts. So, for example, had we had the time again, and we were voting with all of these factors together, such as the cluster model, the targeted high needs, that might change our vote. So I just think that's really important for our understanding. I just also want for the record, just to know that Sally and I are from the same trust. So that's, you know, in the spirit of transparency, I think that's really important that we recognise that when voting. And we may well have a different vote, and that's absolutely fine. A couple of points from me, really. I spoke to Scott on Friday. Forum funded EISS for primary at 104k, I believe, in that spirit of looking after each other. I get quite split with this because I'm primary and secondary. I see how fragile primary budgets are, really, really fragile, and that we can't afford the support for children that need it most, and therefore their needs will escalate if we don't have the funds, and the HCP numbers will go up. So I completely see it from a primary perspective. If we went for, and that would be particularly the case if we went for option 1, secondaries clearly value and need it more. I think that's fair to say from the votes. One of the things Scott and I know we can't do this now, but we talked about for the future, is it something that we should be looking to fund more from secondary than for primary, for example. That's not something that we've explored on this occasion, and that I think is something worthy of discussion for next year. So I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable with the intention being, let's honour this for several years without having that broader discussion, because I feel like that's fair on primaries that are really struggling to meet high levels of need and growing. And my third other point really is, and this is my thoughts as chair of high needs, not necessarily representative of the group. And I think that term, the cake is the cake, is something I've coined from the chair in another forum. So, but what I think we really need to do as a partnership is really agree on our longer term highest priorities. As an area, we're all operating in a very broken SEND system. It's known that nationally. The cake is the cake, and we've got to try and spread it round. But I think we need to, as agree in a forum, perhaps for much earlier planning, is really pinpoint where we want to spend the money, because none of us are affording to work in the that gold standard that we used to perhaps be able to deliver. It's harder and harder to deliver that on the funds that we've got. So I would just recommend that that's something that we really look at through SEN high needs, and then at forum as well going forward. That's my thoughts for the record.
Thank you, Esther. And we'll make sure those all go down and are informed as well. Are there any more? I can't see on my screen, but it might be because my screen's bad. Any more questions? Rachel, thank you.
Sorry, I just had my hand up as well. Really, most people have said what I was going to say. It is quite obvious that secondaries have voted more for the second option because they perhaps use it, but I don't want Malden Oaks to think that we don't understand as primary schools how important it is. And it is unfortunate that we didn't actually discuss, like Esther was saying, the whole thing all together, which it was originally down to do, to look at the whole of provision. So look at AP for primary as well as AP for secondary, because it is all really important. And I'm not sure, even though I know there's been a lot of work and a lot of questions answered by Sam, which was brilliant. Actually, has there been enough time for primaries to understand the fuller picture? We haven't had a discussion altogether. Yes, we've had the questions and a voting, but we are now getting down to some really difficult decisions. I've seen budgets in primary schools that are really struggling. Our small one form entry schools, and I know it is all, they'd have to pay less and all of that kind of thing, but we are in a very difficult position. I think you agree with what everybody's saying, but we do need maybe a better use or understanding of how we're going to use the higher needs block going forward, like Esther was saying. Maybe it doesn't help the voting, I know, but I just wanted to say.
And Lucy, Scott, is that something that we can do moving forward in terms of apportioning, doing that so that we don't get there? Thank you, Lucy.
Yeah, so we can certainly for next year kind of look at the approach and when we look at different decisions, as well as look at how schools would like to kind of be briefed in advance of schools forum on all the implications, making sure that you've definitely got the time to kind of discuss it, potentially as secondary and primary together as well as separately. The other thing that we could look at is if schools preferred to have sort of just secondaries contributing to secondary AP and primaries contributing to primary AP, then we can look at mechanisms outside of the formula for those services to be funded. So, for example, a series of SLAs and things like that. So we can certainly outline what all of those options are for schools to consider. I think it's tricky given we're in December, if I'm honest, to look at those options for next year, but we can certainly start early in terms of looking at, do you know what I mean, all the different funding options, as well as everything together, because I think, you know, we would agree with heads that, you know, finances are different now to what they were, you know, 5-10 years ago. And actually there's some really difficult decisions to be made, and a decision in one place needs to, you know, will impact on decisions in other areas as well. So we're very happy to work with you in terms of doing that for next year.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Okay, are there any queries, questions, adds, builds, or challenge as we go forward now? Any thoughts before we move towards the vote? I mean, we will go through and vote on all three, but I can't help but be compelled to hear that there's not much love for vote for option one, but nonetheless I think we'll go through it because it's practical. It went out. I think we need to remember that we were colleagues were asked for a consultation to get the declarative intentions of people. That consultation was on three things. We have had that consultation back. Option one at 21%, option two at 30%, and option three, the third option, option 40 at 48%. But I still think it's important, while it is clear that option one doesn't seem either wanted or voted for, that we go through all three. So as per the voting, we obviously, if your name, and sorry to do this.
No, but we're.
Sorry? What was that? Did I miss something?
That was Rebecca Harris.
Oh, no worries. Rebecca, did you have a question? Sorry.
No, I was just wondering about how the vote is being split three ways. So if someone were to vote for option one, they may be happy with option two as well. So do we have to choose a single option?
I'll need
The answer is yes.
guidance on that, team. Sorry, Kevin?
The answer is you can vote once.
Okay.
There's nothing in the Constitution which allows for more than one vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so with that in mind, then we'll go to vote on what was put out to consultation. So please raise your hand on the screen. There is a thing at the bottom there that looks like that, and then like that, that we can go through. So obviously anyone can change their mind. So if anyone is now minded previously option one, but you know it may not be the one forward, please feel free to put that into option two, or indeed option three, but it would be incongruous if it did. So all those in favour, please, of option one, please raise your hand. Okay, Kevin, I'm seeing no votes for option one as we expected.
There are no votes for option one.
Okay, all those in favour of option two, please raise your hand.
Chair, if you just give me a minute so I can make a note. Chair, there are 8 in favour of option 2.
Thank you. People lower their hands. And all those in favour of option 3, please raise your hands.
There is 6 in favour of option 3.
Okay, so we pass option 2.
Option 2 is carried.
Thank you very much. So thank you, colleagues, for that. Thank you, everyone who's put together a great deal of work on there. AFC officers, is there anything else that we need to do before we do that? Esther?
Yeah, thanks, Ash. I just think, again, for the record, we just need to emphasise the impact for primaries there and really look at that for next year. Maybe if they shouldn't be carrying the weight of this, it doesn't feel comfortable to me. I'm really, really torn. I vote. You saw what I voted, but you can feel the weight for the primaries is so profound.
Thank you, Esther. And I think one thing we need to do as a group, as in the subgroups, is looking at that, because that does. And what we never want to create is a primary versus secondary, an academy versus non-academy. As you say, there's one cake and there's also one family of us all working together at AFC. So I'd agree with that. Sorry, Lucy, I cut in ahead of you.
No, I was just going to say what I would suggest we do so that we're not in a situation where heads feel rushed again is if heads are happy, we will put in a kind of a workshop session in May, June time so that well ahead of any decisions being made around future funding, there's that opportunity to discuss what the different options are within the formula, outside of the formula, but also, I guess, the conversations that heads may want to have in advance of any decisions being made. So I can take that away as an action and liaise with you, Ash, and with primary heads as well around potential dates and formats and what that could look like and how it could be helpful.
Yeah, I think that caveat of avoiding this again and getting it there earlier would be well received by all. Sophie?
Yeah, just to reiterate a suggestion that another MAT leader had made to me in conversation that I do think is a worthwhile exercise is really unpicking the high needs block funding and understanding exactly what do we have no choice over, what is a nice to have, but you know, we need to make a choice, and what do we really, you know, is a bit of a luxury there that we do have some optionality over. And I think that we, as well, I speak for myself, but I suspect other head teachers would really value that clarity. I know Scott helped me with that earlier on this term by providing that really detailed breakdown of, look, this is where all the high needs block money goes. Some of it we cannot avoid, some of it we have choice over. And I do think that it would be really helpful that we did that much earlier on than May, you know, that work needs to start January, February, to really help us understand that. And, you know, I understand the question about primaries funding, primary or alternative provision, apologies, and secondaries funding, but we also need to understand what does that cost look like for primaries as well, because they are in a very fragile situation. My understanding is that we share in supporting the funding of the primary alternative provision, and that's always been welcome and helpful to primary colleagues. So I don't know if it's so easy to just uncouple it and say, there you go, primaries, you know, is that sustainable and affordable? I think we need to, you know, really look at those numbers with primary colleagues to really understand what the implications are for them.
I'd agree with you, Sophie, and that, yeah, and also looking at the delegated versus the other ones, just to make sure we're clear and recognizing that that it's slightly different, isn't it? This whole vote on Malden Oaks was because of external changes as well. What we vote on at primary is internal. So I think breaking all that down, I'd agree with Sophie on that. Esther?
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the other things I think it'd be really wise for us to look at is is there the sufficiency of provision at primary for AP as well? Because if there isn't, then that's going to have a knock-on effect at secondary, because we're not meeting the need at the earliest stage either. So it's really really quite complex, isn't it? We need to unpick it all. It's making my heart pound more than setting my trust budget. So yeah, I think it's been really challenging for us all to navigate through this.
Okay, so Lucy, Scott, is that something maybe we get? I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to do anything this side of Christmas on it all, and then we get together and look the other side of Christmas and look at what we do, ask for some feedback on what we can do. We've got the feedback from here. Kevin hopefully would have had time to put minutes together, and that, so that we can get together and look at, right, you know, lessons learned, what's worked well, even better, if how can we best support everyone. I don't want to finish without Sam. Is there anything else that you want to feed into all of this? Obviously, you're the one sort of most affected.
No, just say thank you very much to everybody, and I totally agree with what everybody's saying about reviewing, you know, the whole picture rather than just one part of it, and starting that process earlier. So yeah, I welcome that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Scott, Lucy, is there anything else we need to cover? Kevin, anything that we need to do constitutionally that we haven't yet done? Okay, well, firstly, again, to say the same things, thank you, Sam and the team, for doing all of that. Thank you, Scott and the team, and Lucy and the team for doing all of that, and indeed councillors. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas, and that getting nearer the 25th of December, none of you think about Schools Forum. Have a lovely one. Thanks, everyone.
Chair, can you hold on,
Thanks,
please?